Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
My son Joshua was a huge scaredy cat until the age of 8. Every Halloween, when the other kids would dress up in their spooky costumes and roam door to door, Josh would just close his curtains and wrap himself up in bed no matter how much we tried to convince him to go out and play. He was always afraid of the dark, even if he wasn't alone. Once he fell over and scraped his knee, and the sight of his own blood made him hyperventilate. My wife, Nancy, and I were worried he would never grow out of it. That's why I was surprised when, on the day after his 8th birthday, he asked if he could have his own room. Before then, he'd always slept in the same room as his older brother, Tim, because of his night fears. Nancy seemed glad that he seemed willing to be more independent, so I obliged, and we cleared out the guest room for him to move in. We thought he was growing up. Maybe he'd gotten to the stage where he realized there was no such thing. For a while, I thought he might have changed his mind after being alone for a few nights, but he did fine for months. We were relieved that he'd finally passed that milestone at least. Somewhere in the back of my mind, however, I remember thinking his request seemed a bit out of character at the time. A few months later, I was watching Josh and his brother playing in the front yard through my bedroom window when I spotted Josh squatting down on the sidewalk. He seemed to be looking at something on the ground. Upon further inspection, it was the grisly sight of a pigeon that had been run over. Its head had been crushed completely. Brains and blood splattered into the concrete. I was very alarmed to see Josh poking its dead body with his finger, and at that point decided it was necessary to intervene. Running downstairs, I shouted at the boys to leave the bird's corpse alone and gave them a lecture about hygiene. Before I let Josh go, I pulled him back and asked, "Didn't that scare you? Like all the blood?" "Dr. Fearless taught me blood isn't scary," he replied. "The ambulance men and policemen see it all the time. It's just something that comes out of your body. Nothing to be afraid of." "Well, that's brave of you. Just be careful when you see it. It can be a sign of danger." "I know." I assumed Dr. Fearless was some cartoon character, or something he'd seen in a comic. Then I was pretty thankful for whatever it was. It helped him overcome one of his greatest fears, much more than we ever could. Throughout the year, it seemed like he was getting braver. He wasn't afraid of spiders around the house anymore, or being alone in the dark, and when October rolled around, he even went trick-or-treating for the first time and had a great time with his friends. Things took an odd turn when I walked into his room one late night to tell him to go to bed. He had headphones on, so his reaction was delayed, but as soon as he saw me, he closed the browser window before I had a chance to see what was on it. "Josh, are you watching something bad?" "No." He looked around, slightly shocked. After a few seconds of silence, I left him alone and went back to bed. It'll seem less like an invasion of privacy if I catch him watching his porn red-handed, instead of forcing him to show it to me and making things awkward, I thought. I talked to Nancy about it, and she said she'd be on the lookout. A week later, she reported back with some worrying findings. Josh had apparently been short-tempered and isolating himself more in his room. My wife checked his laptop browser history while I was at school and took a picture of what was there. His most recent searches included scariest movies, surgery pictures, serial killers, murder, dead body. When we confronted him about this, after he came home from school, he burst into tears and mentioned that Dr. Fearless told him it was good to look at scary things more often because he would get used to them. He said it worked, and a lot of the things he used to be afraid of no longer scared him because of it. "Who's Dr. Fearless?" I asked. "Oh, he's a doctor I've been talking to," Josh replied. "He helps children not to be afraid." Nancy and I looked at each other. "You talk to him?" I asked. "We send each other emails. He's been helping me overcome my fears. Things like blood and ghosts and serial killers. I talk to him whenever I'm feeling scared, and he always finds a way to make me feel better." "But he's not someone you've met before?" No, I haven't seen him in real life." "Haven't we ever told you not to talk to strangers?" I said in a concerned tone. "I'd like to see those emails," Nancy interjected. Josh handed over his laptop reluctantly. "It's late. You should sleep now, son," I said. "We'll have a chat about this in the morning." He went back to bed, and we began to look through his inbox, which was still logged in. I spotted the email address and opened up a long list of back-and-forth emails between my son and Dr. Fearless. His very first email read, "Dear Dr. Fearless, my name is Josh, and I'm 7 years old. I'm always scared of things like blood and bugs and skeletons. My friends make fun of me, and it makes me sad, so please help me not be scared anymore. From Josh." I noticed the first reply came within 5 minutes of him sending that email. "Dear Josh, thank you for writing. I can definitely help you overcome your fears if you agree to have a go at my free 10-stage coaching program for kids. It's definitely a beginner-friendly program. For each stage, there are 100 items. I'll email you a set of 10 items each day. An item can be a picture, a video, or an audio clip. All you have to do is email me back describing each item within 24 hours. And if I'm satisfied with your reply, I'll send you the next set. Don't worry if you don't get some right first time. You can just try again. If you need a time extension or have any other problems, please let me know. The last stage is a little bit different, but we'll get to that later. I promise that once you finish all 10 stages of the program, you will truly be fearless. You will never be afraid of all things horror again, and you'll be much braver than your friends. Love from Dr. Fearless." "Dear Dr. Fearless, okay, I want to do this. Thank you. From Josh." The email reply after that contained no body text, just 10 attachments. I opened them up, and there were 10 pictures of stuff that might be considered scary to kids, but nothing out of the ordinary. Josh had replied back with numbered descriptions of each picture, no longer than a sentence each. 1. Cartoon ghost with a smiley face. 2. A dark street. 3. A Halloween pumpkin. And the like. Dr. Fearless replied the next day. "Well done, Josh. That wasn't bad, was it? Here's your second set." The second set also contained 10 images of pretty much the same kind of stuff. They emailed back and forth, each set of the first stage containing 10 mildly spooky images, but nothing out of the ordinary. After the 10th set of stage 1, Josh received this email about 2 weeks later than when he first sent it. "Dear Josh, congratulations. You've finished the first stage of the course, and by now you should be feeling a bit more familiar with some of the things you thought were scary. They aren't too bad when you get used to them, are they? If you would like to see more items from the first stage, please let me know. If not, then we will begin stage 2 tomorrow. It will work just like the first stage. I send you the item set and you describe the items. Keep going. You're doing great, and you'll be fearless in no time. Love from Dr. Fearless." The second stage was much like the first, with a few more odd images between the normal ones. Not that this whole thing was normal at all, but this was when my heart rate began to increase. that cartoon ghosts and skeletons were still there. This time, he gradually added some creepy doll pictures, clown images, people making weird faces, anatomical drawings. Nothing extreme, but stuff you wouldn't really expect any doctor or counselor to send to a child for any therapeutic reason. Josh did tell him some of the images made him feel uncomfortable, and the solution was just to send more sets of images similar to those. Sometimes Dr. Fearless would explain what was in an image and why it wasn't scary. It seemed to take a lot of extra sets for him to adjust to everything. But once he wasn't afraid of anything in Stage 2 anymore, they moved on to Stage 3. There were many more real-life photographs rather than drawings or cartoons in Stage 3. People with common injuries like cuts on their arms and legs, bruises, and the like. The fear factor was ramped up a little, and many of the images you might expect to see during the milder parts of a horror movie. Dark tunnels, prisons, isolated places. Again, this stage took longer to complete than expected, as Josh asked for more sets, but eventually he got bored of the items and said he was ready to progress. I turned to Nancy, ready to discuss how weird this was, but she had fallen fast asleep. Scrolling through the emails, I moved on to reading Stage 4. Through Stages 4, 5, and 6, the images kept on getting scarier. Pictures of injuries became more graphic. The dark scene images transitioned into screenshots of ghosts from horror movies. Stage 7 was a whole new level of disturbing. Screenshots of faces from horror movies and game jump scares. Disgusting images like a huge spider and its babies in the corner of a room. Other stuff you would expect most kids and even adults to get scared by. However, the gradual desensitization process progressed in such a subtle way that Josh's replies seemed as if he wasn't finding the images too bad. If he did mention an image he didn't like much, he would get sent more similar sets like before until he had seen and described so many that he got bored. Some sets could take weeks to complete, but once he finished, he was fully desensitized to all images of that nature. Stage 8 focused on body horror, and was a gradual progression from images of corpses to fully mutilated bodies with awful injuries. I was incredibly disturbed by every single item in this stage, but it seemed like Josh hadn't even noticed how horrific these images were. Perhaps it was the relatively smooth transition from the last stage to the next. He described the pictures in a cold and disregarding way. 1. Dead man with bruises on his back. 2. Woman with head split open in 3 bits. 3. Woman with no arms. Most worryingly, I reverse searched some of the images, and while most could be found on websites as movie scenes or even actual crime scene photos, some couldn't be found online. Shaking violently, I scrolled down past all the gore to Stage 9. No more images. Every item in this stage was a video in MP4 format. It started with clips of horror movie jump scares, then moved on to more and more disturbing imagery, until I literally saw people being burned alive, tortured and mutilated and killed in brutal ways. The last set that Josh had received was set 10 out of 10 in Stage 9. Among the horrifying videos was a clip of a man having his eyes gouged out, a woman being flayed alive, and a demonstration of a Colombian necktie. I couldn't believe some random creep had been sending my child things like this for the past year. I couldn't believe I hadn't found out sooner. Luckily, Josh hadn't replied to that last email yet. I looked through the message history again, scrolling back through hundreds of emails, and noticed there was one crucial missing puzzle piece. My heart in my mouth, I leapt out of bed and ran to Josh's room, shaking him and waking him up. "Josh, I need you to tell Daddy something, honestly, I said, trying to keep my tone calm despite my inner terror and panic. Huh? He rubbed his eyes sleepily. I saw your emails to this Dr. Fearless. This person was sending you inappropriate things no child should see, and you should have known that and told us. But you sent the first email to Dr. Fearless. How did you know about him? Where did you get his email? After I heard his reply, I called the police immediately. He thought. It was written on the inside of a bathroom stall door at school, I think. I'm glad I did, because the next email said that the item in stage 10 was apparently in the park behind school at 11 p.m.
Chilling tales for dark nights.